This optimistic little project called the Walrus started 15 years ago. We recognize that Canada's conversation is complex and necessary, and so it takes many forms at the Walrus. Fact-based journalism in the Walrus magazine and at thewalrus.ca. Some of you have heard me say this before, that we didn't used to have to say fact-based before journalism. We used to think that's what journalism was, but now we have to differentiate ourselves. We have real live human fact checkers, so we say fact-based journalism. We also produce the Walrus books, the Walrus podcasts, and in rooms like this across the country, the Walrus talks. So no matter where the Walrus is or how you consume it, we embrace our commitment to be independent and to bring together interesting and interested people who care about the issues that matter. So here's my favorite game. Hands up if you read the Walrus. Yay. Hands up if you subscribe. Those are my people. Hands up if you support us financially by donating. Those are my true people. Those are the closest people to me. Hands up if you've attended a Walrus Talks before. Welcome back. And hands up if you're new. We need to welcome the new people. Quite a few of you. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming out. We have a number of people special. Well, you're all special. Let's just say you're all special here. But I'd like you to meet some Walri, our Director of Philanthropy and Development. Where's Ame? Where is she? Ame. There she is. There she is way back there, being, Ame at the back. Where's Andrea? Director of Sponsorships and Partnerships. Also at the back. And we have a board member here tonight, Scott Mullen. Where's Scott? You're all hiding at the back. There's Scott. Hi, Scott. You can meet them all at the post-talks reception. There is no way that we can do the things that we do without our partners. And tonight we're really pleased to present this event with Carleton University. Carleton, through their Masters in Philanthropy and Not-for-Profit Leadership, teaches students who want to be the leaders of change. They aspire to make philanthropy better so we can make our world better, both in the Ottawa community and nationally. And to tell us a bit more about this, please welcome Carleton University's President and Vice Chancellor, Dr. Benoit Anton Bacon. Dr. Bacon.
Thank you so much, Shelley. That's great. Good evening, everyone. Kwe. Bonsoir tout le monde. Ça va bien? Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight's a real pleasure to welcome you all to this amazing, beautiful facility. The newest addition to the Carleton campus, right in the heart of downtown, not far from where our university was founded back in 1942. It's great to be on this beautiful new stage. Doesn't it look good? Doesn't it look good? I'm so excited to partner with the Walrus, great publication, a true leader in fostering open debates, insightful thinking on issues that matter to Canadians, and this is a goal that obviously we deeply share at Carleton. And so much of what we do is strengthened through dialogue and collaboration with our community and external organizations. There's so much to be learned from each other through conversations like those we will have tonight. So I look forward to hearing from our speakers. There they are in the first row. 3 of our speakers are proud Carleton graduates. Awesome. Yeah. We'll hear about the impact that each of them has had through their philanthropic efforts, and we're really thrilled at Carleton to be part of this conversation. This is a topic that is very near and dear to our hearts. Impact is at the center of everything that we do. Our efforts to contribute to the greater good in society are embodied in our unifying ethos that I have on my pin here for good. That's our phrase, here for good. And this originated in our current fundraising campaign. And fittingly, some of you might know, we announced some big news earlier this month. We just reached our $300 million fundraising target. What an incredible achievement. We're so proud, we're so humbled, we're deeply grateful to everyone who participated to this great success, who supported our vision, our efforts. It's the most ambitious campaign in Carleton's history. And of course, although we've surpassed the goal, we keep going. Always keep going. Here for good, it's such an important phrase. It speaks to our commitment to enhance the social, the economic, the common good of our world. With our staff, with our faculty, our students, our alumni, our partners, our donors, we're all rallying behind this common cause of doing good. That's our purpose. It permeates every facet of what we do. The research, the great ideas that change the world for the better, our academic programs, and our community outreach as well. But for me, when you say you're here for good, it has a second meaning. It's also a statement of resilience. We're here for good. We're going to stand our ground, whatever happens. This is resilience, and resilience is such an important quality in our changing world. So above all, everything we do is about impact. Through resilience, through purpose, we're motivated to do good, to inspire positive change in people and in the world. So this incredible venue, Dominion Chalmers, in which we gather, is a great example of this. We wanted to build a bridge to our community, Central Ottawa. We wanted to further enhance our connection to the local community, to establish a space in which our students can perform and learn from their neighbors, engage with people from outside the university communities. Universities used to be inward-looking. Modern universities like Carleton are outwards-looking. We want to connect. We want to partner. I'm so thrilled to be here tonight. I really want to thank my predecessors, Roseanne O'Reilly-Runte, whose dream this was. And Alistair Summerlee, who closed the deal last year. Thank you both. And all of our visionary partners and benefactors who made this possible. Our amazing Dean, Pauline Rankin, who's leading our efforts to fill this place with great performance and great academic programming. I really look forward to the next phase for Carleton University. The sky's the limit, and I hope that you'll all be there to share our vision and our mission, and that we'll all be here for good for a long, long time. So we're all in this together. We're all trying to make the world a better place, and this is what our speakers are going to tell you about today, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say. I'll thank you once again for joining us tonight. This is a great evening. Thank you so much, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Dr. Burkholder. It's interesting you mentioned Alistair Summerlee. I was looking forward to meeting you tonight, because when you were at Concordia, Dr. Alan Shepard came after you, and then you came here after Dr. Alistair Summerlee, so obviously big shoes to fill, and you're filling them very well. So it's an honor to be working with you. So I think we have some Carleton alumni here tonight. Is that true? Hello, Carleton alumni. What about Carleton students or faculty? Some of you, welcome, students and faculty. So here is, for all of you, new to us and Walrus already. We know that Walrus isn't a word, but now that you're all here, you are all Walrus, and that is how we think of you. So here's how the Walrus Talks works. Each talker has 7 minutes. They know this. Yes, they do. Each of them will come up and introduce themselves. You have a program. If you've put it away, please get it out. The speaker order is on the front. There is one change. Vicki Saunders, who was to open tonight, unfortunately sprained her ankle on the ice. So we do not have Miss Vicki, but we do in her place, we are thrilled to tell you, we have Susan Phillips, who is the professor for philanthropy and nonprofit leadership program at Carleton. So Susan will open. She'll tell you a little bit about herself, because her bio is not on the back of your program, but all of the other talkers, their bio is on the back of your program, so you can follow along. We're not going to read it to you. we think you can follow along just fine. So what our hope is that when we're finished, 7 talkers for 7 minutes each, that you will all join us at the post-talks reception, and we'll have a lot to talk about. So just before I let them get underway, I'd like to thank each in advance. So thank you to Susan Phillips, Professor for the Philanthropy and Nonprofit Leadership Program at Carleton. Thank you to Ruth MacKenzie, President and CEO of the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. Thank you to Rob Sobey, Corporate Director and Philanthropist. Thank you to Jenna Richards, Artistic Administrator for the Ottawa Chamber Music Society. Thank you to Justin Wiebe, Capacity Building Specialist at the Ontario Trillium Foundation. Thank you to Kaite Burkholder Harris, Community Planning Officer at the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. And thank you to Rita, Celli, host of CBC's Ontario Today. And thank you all for coming. Let us begin.
Thank you, Shelley. I am not Vicki Sanders, as you know. I had about 20 hours notice that I would be filling in for Vicki. I'm Susan Phillips. I'm a professor in the School of Public Policy and Administration at Carleton University, and I supervise Canada's first and only Masters of Philanthropy and Nonprofit Leadership. I do research in philanthropy. I edit the leading international journal in the field. I'm immersed in research, so it wasn't that difficult to pull together a few thoughts, although asking an academic to speak in 7 minutes is very dangerous. As an academic, I have 27 points, all of which will be on the exam, but I will constrain myself. My main point is this: to give smart, we collectively need to be smart, or at least smarter. Philanthropy is at a critical time that requires us to be more strategic and impactful. We have complex societal and environmental problems that governments alone can't tackle. There's an impending intergenerational transfer of wealth and changes in lifetime wealth as family and professional businesses are sold. Millennials outnumber the boomers, and they give differently. Women have independent wealth and influence, and they give differently. We are an enormously diverse country, and those communities have specific ways of engagement. Technology has created new means of giving, and big data are everywhere. All of this creates new opportunities and challenges for philanthropy. So in this context, what is smart philanthropy that has impact? Let's start at the high end of philanthropy. High net worth families in Canada are underperforming. They are less generous, in general, as a percentage of their wealth than middle or lower income Canadians. And their rate of giving has been stagnant, even declining, for years. The Gen Xers, the 1970s babies, are the worst. Now, there are probably lots of good reasons for this, housing costs, etc. But we need to pull high net worth families into more engaged philanthropy. For example, wealth advisors could be better informed and serve their clients more fully about giving options. Ask Ruth MacKenzie about the work that the Canadian Association of Gift Planners is doing in this regard. For many families, donor-advised funds have become a favored vehicle, and they are the fastest destination for charitable giving in the US and Canada. Some of you probably hold such funds. If so, you have a growing responsibility to learn and to think about how you will put these to good use. Don't be lazy. Perhaps call on your community foundation as a valuable resource in learning about community needs. With growing income inequality, the social license of big philanthropy, big institutionalized philanthropy, private and corporate foundations, as well as large donor-advised funds, is being called into question. As organizations sitting on billions of tax-subsidized assets, held in perpetuity, forever and forever and forever, foundations are appropriately facing new questions about their impact. With some important exceptions, and you will hear about one tonight, private foundations are unduly conservative in Canada and are not as engaged in strategic systems change to the extent they could be. They too need to step up. But the bulk of philanthropy is not big philanthropy. It's about more modest donors and volunteers, about people like us in this room. Of course, we give with our hearts. Mom died from a particular disease and you want to help find a cure. You love your university experience and you want to give to your alum. But if we want to make systems change, we need to use our heads more and explore more. Not forgetting our universities, of course, after all, my president is here. Smart giving usually starts with people engaging with causes and organizations in other ways before and in addition to their giving. They ask questions, they volunteer, they learn how systems work and how to disrupt them. They test drive organizations for impact. For instance, if you are interested in ending homelessness, ask Kaite Burkholder Harris about how the system works in the first place. The charities and other organizations that are conduits for philanthropy are also facing a transformation, but they are constrained in how well they can perform, constrained in part by us, donors. To have greater impact, many need new kinds of skills to innovate and assess what works, particularly data analytics skills. They need better technologies to integrate services and use data effectively. Many require greater financial literacy to engage the social finance markets that are emerging. Yet these systems are underdeveloped. Why so? Well, in large part, it's because of the overhead myth. There is a widespread perception among funders and donors, us, that effective charities are those with low administrative costs or low overhead costs. Charities have responded accordingly to these expectations. Indeed, research shows that overhead costs have been declining over the past decade. What this does is to create a starvation cycle. Think about what those donations support: skills development, technology, recruitment, the very systems needed to be innovative and impactful. As donors, we need to change our assumptions about overhead. If you are a fundraiser who claims that 100% of the donations go to the program, shame on you. This occurs only if someone donated or volunteered the costs of fundraising and other program supports, and you need to tell us that. There's also an impending leadership gap in the charitable sector. Over 40% of executive directors, according to a recent report, are over 55, and most organizations have no succession planning or leadership training. The leaders of the future will not and should not be the same as in the past. At the same time, the governance of charities, including volunteer-led boards, is becoming more complex, with a greater emphasis on moral leadership, on meaningful, well-performing, and inclusive organizational cultures, which is particularly important to attract and retain the millennials. In so many respects, ethics in philanthropy has never been more important. More sophisticated education for leadership will be essential, which is why we at Carleton are so passionate about building expertise in graduate education for philanthropy. In short, to give smarter, we need to be smarter. As individuals and families, to ask more questions, to explore, to find out why systems don't work and how to disrupt them, to dispel the overhead myth. As institutions, to be more strategic in the use of endowed assets and collaborate with others in change. As governments, to ensure an enabling environment. I'd be happy to talk about that later. Collectively, we need to invest in education, R&D, and infrastructure for those who can use our philanthropy well. Thank you.
I'm Ruth MacKenzie. I'm guessing few of you in the room this evening have even heard of the organization I represent, the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, or CAGP. We are an organization made up of an incredibly passionate, optimistic group of people, fundraisers and advisors in tax, law, and finance, who help people amplify the impact of their charitable giving by donating assets instead of just cash. One of the ways that happens that you're probably most familiar with is leaving a gift to a charity in a will. As a quick sidebar, I'm not at all a religious person, but the irony is not lost on me of talking about this particular subject here in a church, where generosity and immortality are not uncommon subjects. When I was a 23-year-old scrappy activist, some cynical 35-year-old said to me, you know, there's never going to be a revolution. And I know they were just trying to inject some realism into my idealism, but I mention it because I still believe in revolution. I believe in change that can be revolutionary. Actually, when I think of charitable giving, we are somewhat in the midst of a revolution, albeit a notion of revolution that perhaps has more middle-aged nuance than my 23-year-old self envisioned. And I say that at a time when so many people feel a sense of pessimism and uncertainty. Global warming is real. For many, personal debt is almost unmanageable. The 2017 Deloitte Millennial Survey showed that many young professionals are worried about what's going on in the world, about their own futures, their job security, for instance. There is an inevitability of change, but there are also two things that won't change, that will always be part of our futures. The first thing that won't change is the need the world has for generosity. That need will always be there. It may look different, it may be more complex, but it will always be there. Many of the causes that will be crucial in the future will reflect where we've gotten to because of our actions today, but they will continue to rely on the generosity of generations to come. The second thing that won't change is the need we human beings have to connect, to belong, to be part of a community that in the future may be more diverse, more global, more broad. It's a need that compels us to share, to tell stories. We look for meaning in our lives and purpose. And this is where the optimism that my colleagues and I share comes from, because despite the fact that donations to charities have flatlined, or that fewer people are giving, or that we know that many of those with enormous capacity to give are punching well below their weight, philanthropy is still one of the most powerful paths to fulfilling those needs, the world's need for generosity and the human need for connection. I know the imagery the word philanthropist conjures up, that very wealthy individual donating millions of dollars and getting their name on a building. But in reality, that's a small niche of philanthropy. Here's the revolutionary thing. I'm talking about a notion of philanthropy that is utterly achievable for almost everyone in this room. Planned giving is certainly not new to the landscape of philanthropy, but it is an approach that is under-recognized and its potential not nearly harnessed to its full effect. And in a world of growing inequality, it's the ultimate path to egalitarianism in charitable giving. We can't and we won't leave philanthropy up to the philanthropists. It belongs to all of us. It's not about hubris, but it is about a person who maybe didn't fit in as a kid, taking a few dollars a month to set up an insurance policy that results in a six-figure gift, more than they ever thought they could give, to the Boys and Girls Club in their community to help other kids who are experiencing bullying. Did you even know you could do that? Many people don't. Including a charity in your will is planting the seed of a tree under whose shade you will never sit. For many who've given throughout their lives, that $25 to someone running a charity race, or the $5 a month to the Walrus. It doesn't say that here, I just made that up. Philanthropy, our will is often a time when most Canadians are astounded by their ability to make a much more significant gift. For many, tax benefits may not be an incentive to give, but they do allow us to plant a bigger tree, or plant a bigger seed for a bigger tree. It democratizes our ability to give, and in that context, everyone can be a philanthropist. It's about impact, it's about changing the world, it's about revolution. In a digitized world that has brought us both closer together and further apart, philanthropy can be the connector to the human condition. And part of that human condition is aspirational. What do you want to achieve in your life? How do you want to be remembered? Giving feels good. We know from research that when we give, the pleasure center in our brain is activated, the area of our brain that releases dopamine. But when we think about giving in a planned way, in a thoughtful, reflective way, something entirely different happens. Dr. Russell James at Texas Tech University wanted to understand more about how the brain reacts to giving, but in particular, how the brain reacts to bequest giving. That's charity speak for a gift in your will. So he put people in an MRI machine, and he read them planned giving brochures. I kid you not. And this is where it gets really interesting. It wasn't the pleasure center of their brain that was activated. It was an entirely different area. It was the region of the brain which connects the memories of your life, events and things that happened to you, what Dr. James calls your personal autobiography. It's activated when you mentally travel back in time. What a concept, using generosity to tell your life story. Of course, that means we're reminded of our mortality, and that may be something that is intrinsically uncomfortable. But creating space to reflect on past events, to connect to those emotional moments in your life, can take us to the future as well. The impact we want to have, the connectedness we seek, how we want to be remembered. And if it connects us to how we want to be remembered, well, the best-selling author, David Eagleman, said, we all have 3 deaths. The first death is when our body ceases to function. The second death is when our body is consigned to the grave. The third death is that moment sometime in the future when your name is spoken for the very last time. I and my colleagues at the Canadian Association of Gift Planners have the immense privilege of helping people lengthen the time until their third death. Not with names on buildings, but through a biography written in good works for years to come. Immortality through generosity. How revolutionary is that? Thank you.
Hi, bienvenue à tous. I'm Rob, and I'm a recovering corporate executive. Thank you, both of you. Thank you. On philanthropy, Joey Ramone once said, "Giving, if you're not in it, you're out of it." Well, 5 years ago, I left our family business to spend more time on that very thing. After spending my entire career in education learning how to make money, I'm now trying to learn how to give it away effectively. If your philanthropic goal is smart, high-impact giving, I'm here to tell you it can sometimes be easier to make it. I'm proud to say my family places great importance and focus on philanthropy, and I'd like to share some of my learnings from this. I'm not a subject matter expert. All causes are good causes, and I don't believe yet that there's one silver bullet to always achieve high-impact giving. But there is one piece of potential advice that's emerging in my head from our journey. First, actually, for me, it wasn't Joey. Our story begins at the turn of the previous century with my great-grandfather, J.W., and his wife, tithers, who donated 10% of their earnings to the church in our small Nova Scotia coal mining town. His children inherited the importance of giving back. To capture the business-minded imagination of his eldest son, my grandfather Frank, J.W. spoke in a language that perhaps appealed to him. He said, "I don't know how it works, but for every 25 cents you give to the community, you get $1 in return." This became one of the most enduring and recanted pieces of wisdom passed down in our family and was the catalyst for us to understand the power of giving back and the imperative to drill this responsibility into each subsequent generation. As national and global wealth, particularly since the 1980s, accumulates into fewer pockets, the magnitude of the duty to give back is rapidly amplifying. Our family ecosystem approaches philanthropy from 3 angles: corporate giving, our shared foundations, and the private foundations or direct personal giving of our family branches. With a business background, I think I've been able to pick out the benefits, the successes and pitfalls across these slightly different approaches. But one theme has emerged. I increasingly believe that the key to achieving philanthropic impact is by focusing resources strategically. In business, this is called things like intelligent loss of business or supporting core assets. You may be thinking, yeah, I already do that. Well, good. Smart focus equals smart giving. A few decades ago, our family business formally codified give back to our communities as one of its core values to ensure management understood this basic, enduring family belief. It became a rallying purpose for our employees, got baked into the DNA of the company, and helped activate the teams in our stores, for instance. Corporate social responsibility decisions usually, but not always, emanate from marketing departments in search of unoccupied white space for giving. Typically, a corporation will select one main cause, their version of focus, as they know they can't be everything to everyone. Remember this in your giving. Our second approach, shared family giving, and that's we have 160 folks in our family, uses foundations to protect the longevity of our ability to give back, regardless of business results or personal income, thus protecting the effort. Our shared foundations support things such as culture, health delivery and research, education, local community projects. We do use filters to help narrow our focus across available resources. Questions like, is the ask for capital assets, having a pool named after you, or to cover annual operating costs? But is there a direct identifiable impact? Is there a competent team? Should the need calibrate through endowed funds or more immediate spend down? Is there a natural funding constituent like a provincial government? Or is the ask on its own? Frankly, I'm not entirely sure we're focused enough yet in the second avenue of giving to truly maximize potential impact. We've got work to be done. I believe our family's third platform, the enlightened, focused, personal giving of individual branches, might be producing our highest impact. I'm seeing more movement down this path as individuals, small groups, and nimble foundations are really starting to create strong outcomes. They might ask, what are the unaddressed or the future needs in the community? Is there a cause hiding in plain sight? Is the project innovative with a compelling new idea? Is there an opportunity to disrupt current approaches? How many human lives are directly affected, and in what way? By focusing and declaring what you stand for, you're also declaring probably what isn't going to make the cut. Not that it's not a good cause, they're all good causes, but it's about maximizing direct outcomes, dollar for dollar, optimizing impact. My branch's foundation, for instance, worked with our local community college last year to create effective educational access awards with the goal of attracting 100 Nova Scotians per year who, not for lack of smarts or ambition, might not otherwise ever consider going to post-secondary. This taught me the power of staying focused, being innovative, and activating the local. In this case, dozens of community organizations in Nova Scotia, plus law enforcement agencies, to help identify folks that a tuition hand up, not hand out, would impact the most. Be concise and deliberate in your intent on the need you identify and which speaks to you the most. We're also learning that giving shouldn't always be a one-and-done deal. Work closely with leadership of the Ask when possible, and continuously reinvent your association with their cause. Maintain the ability to evolve, transfer, tweak. Sometimes you get entrenched in the current and miss obvious impact opportunities in the future. For instance, the new outcomes of our community college project that I just mentioned was an epiphany for me to switch two of our other 3 educational awards from merit to merit and needs-based. Focusing can also help you evolve from being reactionary, waiting for asks to come to you, to being pro-actionary, actively seeking out good ideas, or even working with the right people to start something entirely new and impactful with seed capital. But you don't have to reinvent the wheel either. There can be a lot of operating leverage, another business term, in working with asks so that your incremental support leads to direct and immediate outcome. This is what we did last year here with the NGC, for instance, with the new international residencies for our Sobey Art Award, and it's working very well. In our private case, every incremental dollar accrues directly to the artists in that situation. On this note, I spent a day a few years back at a small symposium on philanthropy attended by, amongst others, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. At lunch, Buffett said, "Yeah, I believe in what the Gates are doing, so I get behind them. I'm not looking for out-of-the-box thinking, because at my age, I'll soon be in a box myself." I did have a feeling the group was recruiting for the Giving Pledge, perhaps the ultimate commitment. I floated by my father, Andrew Carnegie's quote in the late 1800s, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced." Dad, of course, agreed, then asked me if I had signed anything before I left the conference. Focus is a simple notion, but it works. Don't dilute down. Be selective and deliberate on the causes that you truly believe in. Don't skim your surfaces or spread resources too thin. Innovate and always evolve. Thanks for listening.
Did they purposely put the Maritimers one after another? I don't know. When I was about 3 years old, I started climbing up onto the piano bench after my older brother would spend his mandatory 10 minutes practicing. And I would plunk away at the keys. And from that moment on, you pretty much couldn't pull me off of that piano bench. I knew that I loved music long before I chose to be a musician. It came as no surprise, although perhaps a bit of dismay, to my parents that I decided to pursue music in university. Coming from Halifax and having a sense of community pride and that community was important, I brought that with me to my undergrad in Toronto, and I became very involved in my faculty. I was co-president for 2 years, and I started building partnerships within the community, benefit concerts, bringing students from the faculty out into the community. And I realized that music and the arts were one of the best ways for us to build our communities. By the time I was finishing my undergrad, I knew that I wanted to be part of this force of artists who use their talent for good. It has been a few years now since I graduated from the inaugural class of the Masters of Nonprofit Leadership and Philanthropy at Carleton University. Proud alumni. I learned a lot. Purposely, one of the things was how to say that degree. It's a mouthful. But I took the things that I learned from that degree to the organizations that I've worked for since, One of the organizations that I've been working with in the past 5 years or so is Ottawa Chamber Fest, whose vision is to change lives through music. How does this happen? In so many ways. On this very stage, many, many nights in the year. I see some familiar faces out there who've probably attended some of those concerts. Hi. For those of you who aren't familiar with Ottawa Chamber Fest, we're a 25-year-old organization, nonprofit arts organization, that initially started as a line-up around the block and then spend a number of hours in a non-air-conditioned church listening to fantastic music. And now we are one of the largest organizations of its kind in the world. We still have our 2-week summer festival with people lining up around the block. But we also have 12 community engagement and education initiatives and a concert series that runs year-round. Many of our core patrons come because they love music. But as Chamberfest has progressed in its 25 years, those people who come to our concerts over and over again have also become our volunteers and our donors. We have an army of volunteers. There are 900 in our database, and we could not do what we do on this stage without them. Thanks, Sobey. Many of our core patrons come to concerts almost religiously. We have almost 150 events over the course of a year, and I think we should actually have a chart where we put stickers up to see who comes to the most events. One couple who's been coming basically since the beginning of Chamberfest, they're starting to feel the effects of their age. And the wife in this dynamic duo said to one of my colleagues, "Music literally takes away my pain." They are our donors. And they give opportunities to young musicians, professionals who are on the cusp of their career, who want to be more than just a performer on this stage. They want to be out in the community, making a difference. Many also choose to donate to our community engagement and education initiatives, our C programming. These programs don't appeal just to the music lover, but they also reach underserved communities. One of our programs that we offer is called Xenia Concerts. These are inclusive concerts tailored to families with children on the autism spectrum. I'm sure many of you are aware of the recent changes that have occurred by the government. In our recent meetings in the last few weeks with many partners in the field, not arts related, we've been talking about how difficult it will be for some of these people in the future. I had a number of meetings with these partner organizations where we spoke about how sad it was that perhaps children and adults of different abilities weren't feeling welcomed in environments, concert environments, where perhaps the silent nature or reserved nature of the concert experience was expected and could not be maintained. Xenia Concerts aims to change this. Another program that we have at Chamberfest takes music into long-term care facilities. I personally have performed many of these concerts, and I remember one in particular where as soon as the concert was over, one of the care workers at the back kind of motioned to me. We often go and speak, the performers often go and speak to people following the concert. And I came over to a woman who had absolute joy on her face, and I found out from the care worker afterwards that she had been in this facility for a short period of time, but before she came in, she had always been attending concerts regularly, and since she had moved into this long-term care facility, she was isolated and unable to attend concerts. The care worker told me this was the most excited she had seen this woman in months. It is remarkable to witness people giving so that these opportunities can occur in our community. I think that the arts are one of few fields where a donor can actually have a shared experience with someone else because of the donation that they've made. They can be sitting in an audience next to someone who's only there because of the discounted ticketed program that they've provided. They can be sitting next to someone who is only there because they have been the one to allow the opportunity to make them feel welcome. I think that the arts are often underserved in our discussions of philanthropy. And I think that we have the ability to imagine how we can do this better. I will forever be grateful to the people who allow me to imagine programs that we can take out into the community to make our community better. Thank you.
Just have to move this up just a little bit. I don't know if everyone's been seeing, but we've been high-fiving back here after. It's great to feel really supported from the other speakers. Tanse, my name is Justin. I'm Métis from Saskatchewan. You may have noticed that if you can notice my bolo here. I don't know if folks can see it at the back, but it has an infinity symbol on it. Or if you saw me earlier, I was wearing a sash. Before I get started, I just want to tell folks 3 things about Métis people. The first thing is that we're still pretty upset about the 1885 resistance and that our land was still taken. We still don't have that back. The second thing is fiddle. The fiddle is God's instrument. It's very, very special. And I say that here. I don't know if there's enough fiddle in non-Métis churches, but the fiddle is a special instrument. And the third is we have way too many things with the infinity symbol on it in our closets. I have way too many things. I also want to begin by acknowledging the territory that we're on here, on Algonquin territory. I'm a guest on these territories, and I want to commit in front of all of you here to do my best not to do any harm, and that hopefully what I have to share will be useful. Hopefully what I have to say here might be helpful for some folks. So we're talking about impact. I'm not sure why I was invited, but I'm going to do my best to share a few things. When I was asked to speak, the first thing I thought about when I thought about impact was how harmful the arrival of settlers was on these territories for my people. How negative impact is a very real thing. I remember, I think about what it means, what it has meant to my people's languages, the lands, the waters, the animals, the environment. The arrival of settlers hasn't always been something that we celebrate and we talk very highly about as Indigenous peoples. Following that arrival, there was a lot of policies, a lot of really great ideas from mostly non-Indigenous folks to eradicate us, to educate us, to assimilate us. Those are the facts. Really smart people, oftentimes people who had the best intentions. There's no doubt about that. There were times where those intentions were really harmful, and their goal was to hurt us as Indigenous people. But there were other times where the intention was really great. They wanted to support us, and they wanted to help us. The unfortunate thing is no one really stopped to ask us what we might want, what our vision for the future of this country might be. And I think if those questions were asked, that impact might have looked and might still look very different. So what do I do? My day job, I do work in philanthropy. I work at the Ontario Trillium Foundation. I'm one of the few Indigenous folks who find ourselves within the philanthropic world. Frankly, I didn't know what philanthropy meant before I got the job. Like I remember telling my cookum and my family, "Oh, I'm working in philanthropy." No one had any idea what that word meant. So, and I'm still figuring it out. I want to give a special shout out to a few folks, the Circle on Philanthropy and the Ontario Indigenous Youth Partnership Project are 2 really amazing organizations that are shifting the conversation about philanthropy and really bringing the Indigenous perspective to this sector. So if you don't know those folks, make sure you look them up because they are doing this work in ways that I'll never be able to. What I've learned, in the last few years working in this sector is we care about impact. We're really interested in impact. I'm in rooms, at my office and in other foundations' offices. Everyone's talking about impact. We want to make sure that, we're doing good with the money that we have. Foundations, corporate folks, rich people, anyone who wants to do good in the world is interested in knowing that what they're investing in is actually doing something good. And I understand that. I think that's really something positive. The unfortunate reality, like those politicians and those experts, we as funders often don't stop to ask community what they need. We don't often stop to ask what would be impactful to you. As funders, we're the first to put on the expectations of what and how an organization, a community, an individual is going to report and share the impact that they're having with the funds or the resources that we're providing. Too often, we don't engage community in our decision-making processes. You know, what a wild thought to have folks who are most impacted by the negative things that might be happening or the challenges in their communities to have a say over how resources are redistributed, how grants are made. Unfortunately, that still doesn't happen enough in our sector. I want to walk us briefly through a clash of worldviews. So if you want, close your eyes or just imagine, you know, you're in a small Indigenous community. Maybe it's a Métis community back home in Saskatchewan or a First Nation in Northern Ontario. The sad reality is in this community, the language is spoken by less people every single year. There's fewer language speakers. And the community wants to turn that around. They have a vision for a project where they will have one new fluent language speaker each year. One. For that community, that would be transformative. That would represent the revitalization and the bringing back of a language that carries so much. For funders, the idea that one person is changed is a tough pill to swallow too often. That one person might not be deemed impactful enough. But for that community, that one person won't just speak the language again. They'll teach it to their family. They'll teach it to their kids. They'll teach it to their friends. They'll be able to talk to their elders in the language that others have not been able to. So what I'm calling on us to think about is how can we redefine impact? How can we really deeply consider the needs of community? I'm fortunate enough to work at a foundation, specifically in the Youth Opportunities Fund at the Ontario Trillium Foundation, that really brings this idea to the forefront. We're committed to equity. We believe firmly that when you invest directly in community, when you invest in young people with great ideas, that those projects will be more impactful. And I see it every day. Those projects are more impactful when they're designed by people from the community, rather than by big organizations or governments who might not know the realities on the ground or who might not have the relationships that those folks in the community do. So I want to shout out a few organizations that I think are doing really important work. I think it's important when we have platforms that we share it with our friends and our relatives. So there's an amazing organization here in Ottawa called the Assembly of Seven Generations, A7G, doing really important work revitalizing Indigenous culture for Indigenous people here in the city. Another organization called We Matter, an Indigenous-led organization that's promoting a life promotion, that's working to tackle the suicide crisis in many of our communities by showing Indigenous youth leadership. The Disability Justice Network of Ontario, amazing group of racialized young people who are demanding space for themselves as folks with disabilities to be able to live their full lives in this province. Look them up, they'll all blow your minds. I'm lucky enough to work with folks like this every day. So I'll leave you with one last thing. For those of us who are interested in making the greatest impact, who want to change the world, remember that those people closest to the issues and the challenges that you're interested in solving have the solutions. We just need to listen.
Ditto to everything you just said. A number of years ago, when I was a young, impressionable Carleton social work student, I ended up getting a summer job at a drop-in center downtown for people who have experiences of homelessness. And as soon as I got into the job, I discovered that my main role that summer would be to plan the annual picnic, the biggest deal of the whole year, or so I was told when I got in. And this was basically a day where we went down to Meech Lake. We had 2 busloads of folks, and we were able to take them and have barbecues and games and prizes, just a day at the beach. And when we actually got to the day, I think what was so striking to me as I looked across and saw everybody out doing stuff, flipping burgers, was how completely normal it was. And the people who the day before were actually, maybe tripping out and were having an altercation with the police, they were leading the volleyball team. And the woman who was in a serious crisis the day before was the one helping to flip burgers. And I thought in that moment, as a young student, that if we want to have an impact on ending homelessness, we need to fix the context, not the person. This is where we are. This is the context. We have a system that is predicated on the idea of escalating risk before we provide help. And so what that looks like in tangible terms is that an 18-year-old has to turn 19, and on the eve of that 19th birthday are asked to leave the group home they're at if they're with Children's Aid. It looks like somebody having to stay in shelter cumulatively for 6 months before they can access affordable housing and be bumped to the top of the priority list. It looks like young women feeling like the only option to get affordable housing is actually to become pregnant, because that's how you can actually get bumped to the top of that list. But I propose to you thinking about this differently. We can do better. This is where we need to go, where we focus our resources not only on emergency response, but we actually completely realign and focus on long-term accommodation and supports for people, and we also focus on prevention. Yeah. And I think what is really exciting, we're doing it. Success is happening across the world, and it is happening in this country. In fact, it's happening in this province. Actually, Finland has effectively ended homelessness, and they've done that because they've invested in housing. Hamilton, Ontario has seen a 30% reduction in the last 7 years in people becoming homeless. Waterloo, Ontario regularly has 60% reductions in people entering into the shelter because of diversion protocols and trying new approaches. Lanark County and Kingston nearby us, they both have seen significant reductions in youth homelessness because they focused on school-based prevention models. And finally, the gold standard that we often talk about in Canada, of course, is Medicine Hat, Alberta, who effectively ended chronic homelessness in 2015. And they have maintained that standard for the last number of years because anybody who enters into their system only stays homeless for 10 days before they are immediately given housing and long-term supports. It's amazing. We are doing this. So how? How are people actually making this work? Well, first of all, data. Data. We're getting nimble and creative and effective at having real-time, robust, comprehensive data where we can see any new person that enters into the homelessness system. When they enter in yesterday, we now know that, and we know maybe where they're coming when our data is really good. We know that maybe there's a hospital that's actually discharging a lot of people directly into the shelter. So maybe we can have a conversation with that hospital and develop a better policy. We also are starting to see what I would refer to as systems integration. This idea that rather than wearing my individual agency hat, we're going to focus on having a systems approach. Instead of one agency referring to other places, we actually have a person coming into the system and being able to access all of the collective resources of the system. And finally, what this really is a change in philosophy. We have stopped asking people to fix themselves before we provide a basic human right. Okay, yes, exactly. So what about taking it to the next level? This last year, I forgot to introduce myself. I apologize. So I work at the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. Should have said that. My name's Kaite Burkholder Harris, and this last year, I've had the privilege of working with communities all across this country in being able to do local systems planning. And specifically, I was focused on a project where we asked the question, what does an end to homelessness look like? How do we define it? How do we measure it? What does it look like in concrete terms? And one of the things that came up again and again. I mean, lots of people talked about systems integration and data and prevention and all the technical stuff, reallocation of funding, but they also talked about something that was, I think, interesting and not something we often hear about in this space, and that was community. People said, at the end of the day, you know, people who experience homelessness, if I get rehoused and the only person in my life is somebody who is paid to be there, it's not enough. We can do better. And when we started to scratch the surface of what that actually meant for people, it was a sense of belonging, and it was also access to something that we also don't talk about all that often in this space, social capital. And the idea that people don't get jobs because of job programs. People get jobs because of connections and networks. And I think what's exciting about this is that we understand this intuitively as Canadians because we have a model. The sponsorship program that we have for people who are coming into this country as refugees is exactly this idea of reimagining the village. It's bringing people to support a person or a family that's coming into the community and being like, hey, here's the good grocery store. Here's the doctor that you could connect with. Let me help you sign up for ESL classes. Let's do this together. Let's have dinner together. These are the sorts of things that help people be a part of community. And if we, in thinking about ending homelessness, are not actually addressing this part of the work, we're not going to have a long-term impact. But I think that we actually understand this, and we know how to do this. And what's exciting about this is that it's not about service providers alone who are in this work to end homelessness. It's all of us. This is a group project. So I encourage you to be a part of that group project and find ways to engage with folks in your community, both after they may have had a brush with homelessness or before. A lot of suburban moms that I talk to have kids who stay on their own couches who are friends of their kids. We already know how to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Rita Celli. I host CBC's Ontario Today. I am in my 27th year at CBC. Yeah. And a proud alumni of the Carleton School of Journalism. So I have to start with this very inconvenient assertion. I am here to speak 7 minutes about a word I detest, openly mock, and do everything I can to avoid saying out loud. I presented this to the organizers, and they said I was still welcome, so here it goes. Well, it is ubiquitous. No one would argue that. Whether you are a movie star, an athlete, a politician, an activist on any end of the political spectrum, it is a word, right? I, on the other hand, and maybe this is because I play with language and I'm trying to move people, and I think it's a boring word. I think it's overused. I think it's colorless. It's so damn adaptable. It means everything and nothing at exactly the same time. And as a journalist, I am really governed by a few principles, and one of them is show, don't tell. Be precise. Don't use adjectives. Use observable details. Every story has really been told, so the goal and our duty is to get close to that story on that day, at that hour, in this moment, and that requires its own scrutiny and purpose. Well, that's what I thought all my anti-impact intensity was about, and then I started reflecting more about this presentation, and I realized that there's more. When I hear it, I freeze. I stop listening. And as someone who communicates in a public space, this is terrifying. I'm looking at you here. I want to hold you. I want you to stay longer. If you're listening, I want you to stay in the car or in the foyer and not turn the channel. And so I realize that is part of the aversion. Now, I manage to do this to people in all kinds of ways because I do see the email traffic. And but something about that word, impact. So, notwithstanding all of that, the goal remains the same. The goal is to affect, to disrupt, to agitate, to create a kind of discomfort and to provoke, to try and create meaning. I mean, I think that's the part I probably fall into in the Impact series tonight. I mean, I try a lot behind the scenes to create a framework from which, in this improv of open line radio, one could hear some meaning. So on the surface, an open line radio show is a pretty old-fashioned, low-budget concept. Radio plus telephone equals program. But a lot can go wrong on the way to a microphone, and I can tell you that I take very seriously the idea that I don't want to have a kind of take it or leave it product. I view this radio show as a canvas, and like a singer or a songwriter, the goal again is to move people. I'm going to talk more about why that's so important. I have twin daggers hanging over my head every single day, and in the middle of the night when I'm worrying. Here's number one, I don't care what random people think. And it's not a product. I can't come on the radio and say, hey, coming up at noon, a bunch of random strangers are going to talk about random things you know nothing about. It's not a product. It's not. And number two, I can never imagine calling a radio show. So think of the juxtaposition in my own head. I want people to do this. I don't know that I would. I can't imagine stopping, making a sandwich for my child, or pulling over my car. But this is precisely the goal every day, is to move someone so deeply, so profoundly. They woke up that morning, they didn't think that they would have to, that they would be compelled to have to pick up the phone and call a radio show. And it's important to have that depth of emotion because there is a sincerity and power in the human voice and story. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. One of the things I want to say is that there's a beautiful and rare thing that I also try to honor as a public steward of this space called Open Line Radio on your Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, is that it's not a silo. I mean, we all know what those are. We look in the world we spend time, whether it's in real time or online, with people who affirm our values and the way we see things. But I can attest to this, that CBC Radio at noon, the program that I have the privilege of hosting, you'll hear the 20-year-old vegan cyclist in the GTA, and you'll hear the pro-Trump person in Mississauga and everything else in between. I mean, it still happens. I want to talk about this power of the human voice, and I want to put it in the context of something journalistically that I think about a lot, and that is the analogy of the courtroom. And to me, the voice is the evidence. I think about my own role as kind of prosecutor and defense, and that is to say that everyone gets a hearing. It's not about just listening. It's not about venting and then moving on to the next thing, and somehow you hope randomly it all means something. It means respecting everyone in their own space and challenging them. So even if, it seems like a reasonable point of view, people work harder if you push a little bit more. They try harder to persuade. And that's the evidence. You get to decide as a listener the depth of that sincerity, or, oh, I never thought of it that way, or you're ready to write someone off, and then, you have this unexpected empathy, perhaps, to see something differently. Or you may conclude that someone is right off their rocker. C'est à vous. It's the evidence. You judge. And I do believe in a democracy that this is fundamental. that citizens are triers of fact, to go back to this idea of what that means. But facts aren't just numbers and dates. And I have to say that, and I'll say this as a longtime broadcaster, that I do mourn this in my own industry, because there has been a deliberate shift, and you can see it everywhere in broadcasting, where there's a lot more spotlight on the journalist, right? The journalist will tell you what's happening, why it's important, and all these sorts of things. And there's less and less audio of principal actors. And for me, and I do take this seriously, I use audio a lot because I think it has its own intrinsic persuasive qualities, so in terms of setting up a program, but then wanting you, as the triers of fact, as citizens, to hear the evidence and you decide. I'm going to give you some examples. I probably have too many. I've done this, I think, more than 10 years, yes. And I'm sorry I didn't take notes along the way, because there are times where I've internalized so much and I worry and think about it, a show, a person, for a long, long time. But calling a radio show is a little bit like an airport chat. People, strangers, those strangers I referred to, do call up because they want to say something. And I get to also ask questions that I couldn't ask people in my own life. I mean, there's some things, how do you begin? Where do you ask? Too touchy, too intrusive, it would spoil too much. So, like you, I'm the driver's seat, but I am like you. I'm learning, and I get a chance to dare to ask what I really want to know. So when I talk about not caring what people have to say, I mean, it's the randomness of it. But I dare to ask what I really, really want to know, and think that a lot of us might want to know. So, I mean, I've got, a million examples. And, talk about the sex trade on public radio at lunchtime. Phone lines light up. Could have gone on for hours. Is it just another job, was the discussion that day. Why do you drive stoned? Well, let's ask. Why do you drive drunk? Let's ask. Tell us about your abortion, which, I can say, and one of my managers is here, it sounds a little off when you say, I'm going to go on the radio at lunch and ask people about their abortion. It wasn't about their motive. It was just, what would you tell someone if someone dared to ask? And I could go on, right? Like the idea of, we're in a society where we say, let's talk about mental illness, but really, to take that further and create more meaning is, why did you stop? Why did you decide to stay? How did you correct the thinking? When doctors talk about correcting the thinking, and, these are the sorts of conversations, these big emotion sort of conversations that, for me, always show how human we are, how the same we all are. I was thinking about it's not in my notes, but it was coming to me as I was sitting here tonight listening. I a few years ago now, invited Ken Dryden to come on the air to talk about something very personal for him, a very deep regret that he had for not doing more, he felt, when he was the head of Maple Leaf Gardens. And many of us know the sad and long story of sexual abuse there. And I knew going in, that I'm going to put this esteemed hockey great on the radio, that it would shake someone's equilibrium. Someone was going to started their day and something would shatter for them to hear him. And the depth of his sincerity and that sense of regret that he had. And I won't tell you about that whole program, but I'll tell you about an email I got from a listener who said they were walking into a grocery store here in Ottawa, and there was a man, sort of with the door slightly ajar, sitting with the car running, listening, and they could hear the program. And when she came out about 20 minutes later, he was still there, and he was just crying, sitting in his seat. We might speculate on what that meant to him. I can't know. try to create meaning, a forum where people can extract some kind of meaning. I can only give it my most sincere intention that there is some kind of pro-social thinking and intent on my part. But I can't control what happens, and I certainly can't control how people receive the information. We recently did a program, a couple actually, but just in January, so I'll offer this little example on alcoholism and a kind of pill that can help reduce the cravings for people who have, an addiction to alcohol. And it sounds almost miraculous. It's very effective. It's very cheap. Why aren't they handing this out like candy? We're talking about this on the radio. A 30-year-old woman called in from Stratford and said, I had to fight my doctor to get this pill. Until I was 28, I was drop dead drunk every single night. This has given me back my life. In any case, we got an email from a woman not long after that program saying that she had gone to a Toronto clinic to ask for this medication. I was told 4 people before me also visited the clinic as a result of listening to the program. A nurse at the Rapid Access to Addictions Medicine in Toronto Western Hospital also wrote to us to say that since the program had aired, multiple people had been coming into the clinic to ask for this medication. One person drove 3 hours to come and get it, and she was over the moon. I mean, what more could we ask for? In journalism, many times you want to, there's a more easy or more clear kind of yardstick when a government might change a rule or there's a reversal. This canvas that I use is not as direct all the time. So it's quite satisfying to get that kind of feedback. Sometimes it's been odd. I remember doing a little show on a wine that had gotten a glowing review in the Globe and Mail, kind of, $10 a bottle, but it's like 20, and the LCVO didn't want to participate, and so by the time we were off the air and people were queuing up all over Ontario. Anyway, the LCVO had dispatched a communications service to tell us essentially, cease and desist. I know. So these days, what I do a lot of is talking with angry people and trying to create a thaw in the kind of public discourse that has seized us. I found myself Googling this very thing in February 2017 and found myself on psychology blogs where I found that is exactly what I was doing. I was trying to validate people's feelings, their alienated feelings, without validating what they're saying. And so I'm playing in a new and risky territory, even for me, and asking people questions like, why do you chant "lock her up" to Kathleen Wynne? Why do you hate the carbon tax? Why do you remain skeptical about climate change? There was one woman who wrote in, and so I've got it here, and I've got to wrap up, but she was scrubbing. She just started scrubbing more furiously at her stove when she heard the program and said, wow! And she was reacting to someone who called in to say that they believed the earth was flat. So I was going to end with an Auden poem that I think about a fair bit, but I'm out of time, and I'll save it for later, because I opened up my newspaper this morning, and this seems like a more appropriate place to kind of bring this a bit full circle. And it was a story about a great newspaper man who passed away this week by the name of Clark Davey, and he's someone I knew and admired and loved very much. And the lead, I'd like to read it to you because it really did jump out at me in the context of today. He was a champion of Canadian journalism and the sort of work, in his words, and this is the quotation, that has the kind of impact that moves people's hearts and their minds, that stirs their sense of justice and changes the rules and the laws to make our society a better place. Yeah, I agree. He was a lover of words and ideas and books and complex things, and I thought, I clearly have to be less dismissive of the word and keep my eye on the goal. Thank you very much.
Everybody, I want to just say before we thank our talkers, I'm going to start with Rita. Next year, Carleton presents the Walrus Talks Create Meaning instead of Impact. Is that good? We talk about that? That was very nice tribute that you did to Clark Davey at the end. That's actually Rita's father-in-law, and she's still here tonight, so thank you. I want to thank all of our talkers, Rita Celli, Kaite Burkholder Harris, Justin Wiebe, Jenna Richards, Rob Sobey, and Ruth MacKenzie. Thank you all. I'm still contemplating being in an MRI machine and having planned giving brochures read to me. I just can't get that out of my head. These things these academics get up to. It's really quite extraordinary. Now, I'm going to hold the audience for a couple of minutes. I have a few secrets to tell you. And I'm going to ask the talkers to up and out to the reception ahead of the audience so you don't do that weird thing and trap them in the front row before they can get a glass of wine. Off you go. This is your time to clap again. Thanks, guys. So we have now produced 105 Walrus Talks evenings like this, which means, 105. I'm 110 years old. That means that there are now more than 700 Walrus Talkers and 700 7-minute Walrus Talks, and Rita's will be there soon. 700 7-minute Walrus Talks, which you can watch at any time of the day or night, wherever and whenever you are on our YouTube channel. Just go to thewalrus.ca. You can also become my favorite person very easily and subscribe to The Walrus at thewalrus.ca, but it's much more convenient to do so tonight at our table in the lobby, where Tina will be thrilled to give you a full year's subscription to The Walrus for just $25, which is, it doesn't even pay for the paper, let's be honest. $25 for the year. And because fake news is cheap to make and fact-based journalism is expensive, we're also asking you to please consider listening to all of the talkers tonight and joining our community of donors. I happen to know that 8 of you made a donation whilst buying your ticket for tonight. Thank you very much. We know everything. We know everything about you. These new 8 donors that I already know about are joining over 1,800 Walrus across the country who give annually and allow us to do the work that we do. And Ruth was right. We love our monthly donors, and we know that you believe that the health of our society depends on having access to quality information that Canadians can trust. So if you feel the same way, take out your phone, go to thewalrus.ca/donate live, and give what you can. Full tax receipt. We are a charity. Also, when you're subscribing in the lobby, Tina will be happy to also take your donation. Dr. Becon and the Carleton team has raised $300 million. We just need 2. That's all we need. You can also sign up for our newsletter. That's the free part. There is one. To make sure you don't miss any Walrus Talks, we'll be back in Ottawa on November 19th, if not before. I'd like to thank Dr. Becon, Jennifer Gray, Mark Savinkoff, and everyone at Carleton University for your support. I'd like to thank our national partners, Inspire and Labatt and Shaw, for being with us wherever we go, and to CBC Ottawa for being our partner in this event tonight. So join us at the reception. You can meet the Walrus event team, Blair, Kaylin, and Tina, and there will be food, there will be drink, and if you are there, there will be great conversation. And I'd like you to remember one thing, if you can't remember anything at all about tonight. We're not actually the walrus. You are the walrus. Thank you. Miigwech. Good night. Safe home.